cars, making my father drive out of his way so I could view them. Anarchic upheaval, in which domestic things got smashed to bits. Watching the heavy statue of the dictator, if that's what he was, being tipped over onto the heads of a mob was the first action sequence I can recall seeing on any screen, and I wonder if I acquired my love of disaster movies, with all their disorder, physical destruction, and mass annihilation, from this long-ago newsreel image. Do I remember my first movie mainly because of the spot on my shirt? Because they are linked events in my memory suggesting each other? Tumultuous rioting in a foreign city in which houses got looted, and the inherent disorder of an eye-catching food stain on my fresh Sunday shirt? Assembling ancestors. When I was 10, my maternal grandmother, Deloney, told me about a relative named Mrs. Clark. She told me 2 stories about Mrs. Clark, which didn't or couldn't jibe. Either she had succumbed in a New Orleans cholera epidemic in the 1850s, or she had cut up her fabulous ball gowns to make bandages for injured Confederate soldiers during our Civil War 10 years later. My grandmother had a daguerreotype of Mrs. Clark, which she gave to me. It had lost its case, and there was only the plate itself, surrounded by an oval of pressed in gilt metal. The image is of a plain woman, her dark hair flat on her head and parted in the middle, wearing a black silk full-skirted gown. At her neck there is a dab of gold to represent her brooch, which the photographer had added. Because I was adopted by my parents when I was a baby, I've never known who my true antecedents were, and so I became interested in my adopted ancestors, and began collecting cased images like that of Mrs. Clark, later buying them from a dealer in Savannah, assembling a group of virtual ancestors. I preferred family groups of well-dressed people, pretty girls with lively, intelligent faces. These were often English. American girls in the 1850s too often looked blank and repressed, almost unknowable, and handsome, waistcoated young gentlemen in stiff collars. I have to admit I was also on the lookout for a spirited mammy, like the large-hearted Hattie McDaniel in the film Gone with the Wind. My cousin Mary Deloney in Austin inherited a daguerreotype of a family slave of our great-grandfather John Haley. She wore a white headcloth like Hattie McDaniel's, but I never found an image resembling the Oscar-winning McDaniel. My grandmother Deloney told me these and other stories as she lay in bed in my Uncle Randolph's house in Port Arthur, Texas. She could provide 5 generations of family names. Her married name, Deloney, her maiden name, Haley, she was Hallie Haley, and Hammett, Locke, and Randolph, taking me right back to the 18th century. But she never spoke once of her husband, Isaac Fox Deloney, my grandfather, or of his family, who were descended from the Broadnax family of the early Virginia colony at Jamestown. In that house in Port Arthur he was persona non grata. In time, as I grew older, I learned about him from his children, first from my mother, another Hallie, who couldn't speak of her father, whom she adored, without weeping, from mother's tougher sister Evelyn, and from their other brother Albert, or Ab. Both daughters claimed their father had looks and charm. His sons, however, had other memories, and the elder Randolph grew to hate him. His father would drop out every so often, leaving his growing family to cope, somehow, in Bogalusa, Louisiana. Months later, he would reappear. At each of these reappearances, my grandmother became pregnant. When she died in 1942, she had been born in 1863, my Uncle Randolph wouldn't put her married name on her tombstone, and inscribed her maiden name instead, Haley. I thought of this interesting-sounding grandfather as a kind of riverboat gambler, with glossy black hair and a dashing mustache, who somehow lived by his wits, and I wanted to know more about him. My Uncle Ab must have been the one who told me that my Deloney grandfather had been murdered by a gang of black workers manning a levee on the Mississippi River during a flood, and that his body had been thrown into the water. He had been an exceptionally cruel taskmaster, Uncle Ab said. But there is an alternative version of how Isaac Deloney died. The year is certain, 1933, and it took place in whereabouts unknown.